Today we're going to talk about censorship, ladies and gentlemen. Always a fun topic. I don't know if you've heard, but recently the James Bond books by Ian Fleming and the Roald Dahl books, which include uh, Matilda, the BFG, Willy Wonka, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, uh, The Witches, James and the Giant Peach. All of his books are getting looked at again and rewritten, edited out some things. Some words changed, and the Bond books they're just ripping things out entirely. Some things changed, but yeah, a lot of things just ripped right up. James Bond books undergo edit to remove offensive language. This comes from the National Review. Ian Fleming's James Bond novels are set to be re-released in April to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Casino Royale, but the books will look a little different. They have been altered to remove potentially offensive language at the recommendation of quote unquote sensitivity readers. I don't know why these exist. I don't know. I don't know what the point is, except yeah, censorship. The Telegraph reports that each book will now feature a disclaimer that reads, "This book was written at a time when terms and attitudes which might be considered offensive by modern readers were commonplace. A number of updates have been made in this edition while keeping as close as possible to the original text and the period in which it is set." I've said this before. If you want to keep as close as possible to the original text and the period in which it is set, then you would leave it alone completely. Like, uh, people understand, you know, people with common sense understand context of the time in which a book is written. They they should understand that the sensibilities of the time will not be the same as the sensibilities of the present time. That's how history works. It goes in one way. It goes in one direction. The change comes after Ian Fleming Publications Limited commissioned a review by sensitivity readers. I don't know why they did. I don't know. Fleming used the N word repeatedly throughout the books he published during the 1950s and 60s to describe black people. I remember I read all the books that Fleming wrote, and I think it was just like one or two books where he actually like talks about black people. Because in one of the books, Mr. Big is the main villain, and he's a black guy in Harlem. So there in that book in particular, I believe that was Live and Let Die. He was yeah, he described black people not in a totally sympathetic light, but again, he was a man of his time. So like you're gonna find these kind of references in a ton of books from the same time. Are you just gonna go back and scrub all of them? Like where does it end? The word yeah, the word scrubbed from the text and replaced with black person or black man. Other edits include a change to Live and Let Die, in which Bond previously said Africans in the gold and diamond trades were pretty law abiding chaps, I should have thought, except when they've drunk too much. Now, he was referring not to all Africans, but the Africans in the gold and diamond trades in particular. Just pointing that out. The edited version acts as, quote unquote, except when they've drunk too much from the text, and according to the report. So they just took out except when they've drunk too much. It's a pretty law abiding chaps, I should have thought. Full stop. Like that makes sense. That you don't even finish the thought there. Another part of the book, which takes place during a striptease at a Harlem nightclub, was changed from, quote, Bond could hear the audience panting and grunting like pigs at the trough. He felt his own hands gripping the tablecloth. His mouth was dry, end quote, to, quote, Bond could sense the electric tension in the room, end quote. All right. You take out a metaphor. It's not to be taken literally. Like he doesn't literally see black people as pigs in this in this metaphor he's using. He probably couldn't think of anything else to describe grunting. Like I don't know. A portion of the book that described accented dialogue as quote straight Harlem deep south with a lot of New York thrown in end quote was removed altogether. I don't really see what's offensive about that. Harlem deep south with a lot of New York thrown in. Uh, yeah. they just look at anything that maybe possibly could be down the line construed as racism, and they just rip it out. The news comes 1 week after the publisher Puffin announced that it had removed language deemed quote unquote insensitive and quote unquote non inclusive from the works of Roald Dahl, the classic children's book author. The edit altered references to characters' physical appearance, like they changed the word fat to enormous, which I don't think is better in any way. Removed some gendered references and made other changes. Yeah, so I guess they put like non-binary language in, like instead of girl or boy, like they put person. That's what I heard, which is stupid. The edits to Dahl's works were suggested by the UK-based consultancy Inclusive Minds, sus title there, which is dedicated to inclusion and accessibility in children's literature, quote unquote. News of the changes, however, prompted a backlash among free speech advocates, including some in the literary world, and the publisher later said the classic texts would continue to be available alongside the new edited ones, which is good. Still don't know why they would need edited ones, but it's still good that they'll keep the classic ones available. A lot of people went out and bought the books. This all just seemed at while it was going down as a marketing tool, like they wanted to get people buying these books more. They have a origin story of Willy Wonka coming out, starring the guy from Dune, Timothy Chalamet. So I could see them trying to get more sales on their books. In the Bond books, meanwhile, many mentions of ethnicity have been removed from several of the novels, including Thunderball, Quantum of Solace, and Goldfinger. Controversial references to other ethnicities will remain, however, including the racial terms Bond uses to refer to East Asian people and Bond's mocking views of the Korean character Oddjob, according to the report. References to the quote-unquote sweet tang of rape and a description of homosexuality as a quote-unquote stubborn disability will also remain. See, just because a character has certain views doesn't mean the writer does, and even if the writer does, you still shouldn't be changing their work. Like I am firmly against censorship in any shape or form, unless it comes to children's education. Then you need to pick and choose like what you're going to have in the curriculum because it might not be suitable for certain ages. That's why you have the when you take the accelerated reader test and that there are certain levels the kids should be at to read certain books. It's because their minds aren't fully developed and you're not really fully developed until you're like in your 20s. But that's a diatribe for another time. We at Ian Fleming's Publications reviewed the text of the original Bond books and decided our best course of action was to follow Ian's lead. We have made changes to Live and Let Die that he himself authorized. Ian Fleming Publications told the Telegraph. Fleming died in 1964, by the way. How could he have authorized the changes from Beyond the Grave? Following Ian's approach, we looked at the instances of several racial terms across the books and removed a number of individual words or else swapped them for terms that are more accepted today, but in keeping with the period in which the books were written, the statement added. We encourage people to read the books for themselves when the new paperbacks are published in April. What's wrong with the books that are out right now? I've read them, I've enjoyed them. There's nothing wrong with them. Like they're just they're pretty straightforward, simple adventure stories in the spy world. Not really, not really much to him. He does go through some character moments, like when Vesper Lynn dies, and other times, like he actually gets married at one point, and then she dies shortly afterwards, at the hands of Blofeld and Spectre. But yeah, for the most part, he's a pretty how do you say static character. He doesn't really change much. Uh, but yeah, there have been a ton of books throughout time that have been censored or banned or taken off curriculum lists, however you want to call it. One of the books that's like it's very ironically been banned is Fahrenheit 451. If you haven't read this, it's all about censorship. It's all about just just taking books out of the equation, just burning them. The government does not want anyone reading anything, so the firemen, quote unquote, are the ones going and setting the fires. And any houses with books in them, they burn them to the ground. So the people end up rebelling in the most subtle way possible because they can't keep the books. They start memorizing them line for line and passing them down. You know, and I guess it'll just continue on through the generations like that. The only, yeah, the only drawback to that would be, you ever play that game where you tell a rumor in somebody's ear and they just pass it down to other people? By the time it gets to the last person, it will not be the same, like at all from from its original uh conception. That's what I fear will happen to books one day. Like they'll just be edited down and watered down till they're not even recognizable anymore. I feel like there is this agenda. Uh, it's a conspiracy of mine. I feel like there's an agenda to make everything just unsuitable for reading till people just don't want to read anymore, and then they just believe anything that people tell them, anything that the government tells them. There's Uncle Tom's Cabin is one that's from the abolitionist time. Uh, Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote this to paint a word picture of slavery in, for an abolitionist newspaper, but it drew the ire of Southern slaveholders, of course, who burned copies and banned it from bookshelves. See, they did not want this message getting out there that maybe slavery's bad. See, sometimes there's a reason like uh, that people want this banned, but it's not always for the good, you know. On the other hand, you don't want your children to be exposed to filth, like you know. See, there's some books that I don't think should be taught in like middle school. Uh, for instance, there's a reason that we learned The Lord of the Flies in high school and not middle school because it's pretty freaking dark and bleak and just depressing. I'm not even sure if we should learn that in high school. It's not one of my favorite books. I like more hopeful books, more like To Kill a Mockingbird. I guess where you have these good characters and they're fighting for justice. Uh, there's stories like for there's stories that are dark but are still more more hopeful. That's what I prefer in what I read. I mean, I do like occasionally the dark story, the story that ends on a dour note, especially from Stephen King. But I do like stories like The Color Purple, where the girl Celie, she overcomes all her hardships and by the end is reunited with her sister. Like that's a positive story. Sure, you have sexual content, graphic sexual content, and situations of violence and abuse, but it's still in the midst of a story that I think is worth telling. This story probably should be for older readers, though it's not. It's not for kids, obviously. So you have to pick and choose. Like why should we read this? Why should we not read this in school, in grade school? Animal Farm has been banned because of its satire on socialism. But the author himself was socialist. He just didn't agree with Stalinist communism. He he was more in favor of democratic socialism. Catcher in the Rye is another one. Excess vulgar language, sexual scenes. Let me see. Let me see. Can't read all this. Oh yeah, yeah. Things concerning moral issues, excessive violence, and anything dealing with the occult. Okay, moral issues you can find in pretty much anything. Communism, among other things. Huckleberry Finn. We've all heard of Huckleberry Finn being pulled and or edited. Describe the book immediately after publication. The book was banned on the recommendation of public commissioners in Concord, Massachusetts, who described it as racist, coarse, trashy, inelegant, irreligious, obsolete, inaccurate, and mindless. Um, I wouldn't call it racist because one of the main characters is a good friend of the main character, and like he doesn't treat him like he's less than. They're I don't know. Maybe it's the whole Engine Joe part. I don't know. I was looking at some other one. It's a long list of books that have been challenged or banned. The very first book in America that was banned by the Puritan government was called New English Canaan. It was written by Thomas Morton. Considered a harsh and heretical critique of Puritan customs and power structure. See, they just didn't want anyone to challenge their power structure, and that's why they struck this book down. I don't think you should have. Okay, I'm against the books that question a child's like gender identity when they're like in in grade school. Uh, I mean, their parents could get them this stuff to read on their own time, but like, why should they be reading this in school? Like, I don't think that makes any sense. Should only be learning about sexuality, whatever gender, in biology class, not in literature class. Literature is about like the human spirit and like I don't know, social norms. I don't know, the human condition. You have your typical stories: man versus man, man versus nature. Uh, I forget. There's like four of them. You have different countries banning different books for different reasons. Alice in Wonderland was banned in China by the governor of one province on the grounds that animals should not use human language, and it is disastrous to put animals and human beings on the same level. That's funny though, coming from them, because they believe in Chinese gods like the Monkey King. I mean, come on. Whatever. James the Giant Peach was banned repeatedly because of references to alcohol, drugs, violence, and suspicious behavior. I guess they left some of that out of the movie. Goosebumps. Books were too graphic and scary for their children. I thought they were scary, but not like super freaking scary. Kite Runner. Harry Potter, of course, was banned because of Satanism, quote unquote, Satanism and anti family themes. I don't think there was anti family themes at all in this, unless you count his relationship with his aunt and uncle and his cousin, but they kind of reconcile at the end, just briefly reconcile. I think this is coming from people that have not actually read these books. Satanism. Despite challenges, Lord of the Flies has never been banned. I'm surprised about that. That's man, you got kids murdering each other. Like they're cool with that. Like kids murdering each other, Hunger Games. That's cool. Oh man. Slaughterhouse-Five. Explicit sexual scenes, violence, and obscene language. Right. Wrinkle in Time. It's too complicated for children. And earlier critics disapproved of its plucky female protagonist. What's wrong with the plucky female protagonist? I don't get it. Oh yeah, and you also saw people going after the Dr. Seuss books. Like that was stupid. What? Yeah, it's so funny that they tried to ban freaking Fahrenheit 451. Primarily though for vulgarity and discussions about drugs. Okay, so you can teach it in high school, I would say. Charlotte's Web was even banned, like, due to themes of death and the fact that the main characters are talking animals. Okay, so that might be China again. The talking animals. I was going to look up. There was something that said, like, what, how they get around the First Amendment, because the First Amendment is supposed to protect free speech, and uh, English canon. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can the U.S. legally ban books? Although censorship violates the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, some limitations are constitutionally permissible. The courts have told public officials at all levels that they may take community standards into account when deciding whether materials are obscene or pornographic and thus subject to censor. So this is the same kind of runaround, the same kind of loophole that Facebook has about censorship. Like, we deemed it against our community standards, so we're going to pull it. So yeah, this is the government basically basically deciding what's suitable or not for you to read. I think books should be available to everyone, like every kind of book imaginable. So yeah, if you haven't before, oh, here's another one: Satanic Verses, Salman Rushdie. This guy has been, man, he just recently got stabbed at a reading. Let me look it up. It's the novel centers on uh references to the satanic verses of the Quran and came to include a larger debate about censorship and religious violence. So the genre it's in is magic realism. It's one of those strange kind of tales that seems like a I don't know, like an out of body experience when you read it because it's so weird. The Satanic Verses controversy, also known as the Rushdie affair, was a controversy sparked by the 1988 publication of Salman Rushdie's novel The Satanic Verses. It centered on the novel's references to the satanic verses of the Quran and came to include a larger debate about censorship and religious violence. It included numerous killings, attempted killings, including against Rushdie himself, and bombings by perpetrators who supported Islam. Yeah, so this novel is like the bane of Islam's existence. They want it wiped from existence. The affair had a notable impact on geopolitics when, in 1989, Ruhollah Khomeini, supreme leader of Iran, yeah, if you watch Seinfeld, you'll hear him reference Khomeini. He's he, he's like he holds a grudge like Khomeini. That's what he was referencing. Khomeini's a grudge against Salman Rushdie for writing this book. So Khomeini issued a fatwa ordering Muslims to kill Rushdie. So Rushdie's had a price on his head. Well, I don't know if he's got a price, but he's got a you know he's got a hit out for him. The Iranian government has changed its support for the fatwa several times, including in 1998 when Mohammad Khatami said the regime no longer supported it. However, a fatwa cannot be revoked in Shia Islamic tradition. So once the fatwa goes into effect, that's it. It's for all time, apparently, in their eyes. In 2017, a statement was published on the official website of the current supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini, stating that the decree is as Imam Khomeini issued. And in February 2019, the Khomeini.ir Twitter account stated that Khomeini's verdict was solid and irrevocable. So that's why people are still after Salman Rushdie. I don't know if he's going to die by natural causes or not at this point. But man, this guy's got to be hiding out somewhere and just keep it to himself. The issue was said to have divided Muslims from Westerners along the fault line of culture, and to have pitted a core Western value of freedom of expression that no one should be killed or face a serious threat of being killed for what they say are right, against the view of some Muslims that non-Muslims should not be free to disparage the honor of the Prophet or indirectly criticize Islam through satire, and that religious violence is appropriate in contemporary history in order to defend Islam and Prophet Muhammad. English writer Hanif Qureshi called the fatwa one of the most significant events in post-war literary history. Yep. Even before the publication of the Satanic Verses, the books of Salman Rushdie had stoked controversy. Rushdie saw his role as a writer, quote, as including the function of antagonist to the state, end quote. His second book, Midnight's Children, angered Indira Gandhi because it seemed to suggest that Mrs. Gandhi was responsible for the death of her husband through neglect. I don't know anything about that. I have that book. I haven't read it yet, but I have read the Satanic Verses. Uh, this, though, yeah, I don't know. His 1983 roman Khalif Shameh took an aim on Pakistan, its political characters, its culture, and its religion. It covered a central episode in Pakistan's internal life, which portrays as a family squabble between Iskander Harappa and his successor and executioner Raza Haider. The Virgin Iron Pants has been identified as Benazir Bhutto, a prime minister of Pakistan. Okay, so they're reading these books that he's writing, and they're just assuming that he's parodying real life uh, Pakistani and Islamic figures, real life figures. Positions Rushdie took as a committed leftist prior to the publication of his book were the source of some controversy. He defended many of those who would later attack him during the controversy. This is about the same thing that is happening to J.K. Rowling right now because of her stance on the genders and how they're different. Like, men cannot be women biologically and vice versa. That's all she's said. Like men need to stay out of women's sports because they're encroaching on their right to, their right to excel. Because the men could not excel alongside other men in these sports. So they decided to become women to excel alongside women. It's pretty ridiculous. So that's all she says. Like women should not have their rights encroached on, which they have been, like lately. And so people are trying to have her killed. People are trying. They dox her. They show her address online. Like I guess it was public knowledge, but yeah. But they're trying to get more people aware of where she lives so they can go after her. And but she is for sure a leftist. Like she agrees with a lot of their views. It's just this one thing that they disagree on, so they're going to come after her. That's the same thing that happened with Rushdie. He forcefully denounced the Shah's government and supported the Islamic Revolution of Iran, at least in its early stages. He condemned the U.S. bombing raid on Tripoli in 1986, but found himself threatened by Libya's leader Muammar al-Gaddafi 3 years later. He wrote a book bitterly critical of U.S. foreign policy in general and its war in Nicaragua in particular, for example, calling the U.S. government the bandit posing as sheriff. After the Ayatollah's fatwa, however, he was accused by the Iranian government of being an inferior CIA agent. A few years earlier, an official jury appointed by a ministry of the Iranian Islamic government had bestowed an award on the Persian translation of Rushdie's book Shame, which up until then was the only time a government had awarded Rushdie's work a prize. Yeah, people are afraid to even award his books prizes. This thing is a New York Times bestseller. According to Nadine Gordimer, a staggering achievement, brilliantly enjoyable. I found it a mindfuck, but it did have its moments. But yeah, that's the Satanic Verses. It's a very controversial book, as I've said. 1984, another one. It's just a dystopian look at what our future could look like if we're not careful. Negative utopia, a startlingly original and haunting novel that creates an imaginary world that is completely convincing from the first sentence to the last four words. No one can deny the novel's hold on the imaginations of whole generations or the power of its admonitions, a power that seems to grow, not lessen, with the passage of time. Yeah, this one I really enjoyed. I'll probably cover this in a separate video. I've already covered Brave New World, which I really like too. That's the one where it's a future where people worship Ford. They got the same guy you think about, the car guy, as their god. Uh, there's this whole assembly line mentality to society. People sleep with everybody else. It's this polyamorous kind of society too. It's very weird, very like I said, dystopic. So what else? What else? What else? I already talked about this book, but yeah, I'll talk about it again. The Captain Underpants has also been challenged because of uh, this a guy in underwear, and there's some potty humor in it, but it's mainly for laughs. It's not even like I find it harmless. I found it harmless when I was in second. I mean, I laughed at it because I was a second grader, and this thing just came out. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I read this cover to cover like several times, picked up all the sequels and read them, loved them. Like I just this was the first series I really followed as a kid. I think if you get kids reading, like that's a win, no matter what it is. Really, James and Giant Peach. This is the version that smells like a peach. Actually, Ugh. Yeah, you smell the peach on the cover. It smells like peach. So yeah, get. Uh, I don't know if they will be publishing the Bond novels in their original form anymore, but get this series if you can right now, like before they freaking erase them from existence. The vintage 007 collection. Mm. And then, of course, the Harry Potter series is fantastic. Highly recommend. Very well written, fun. This is a good first entry into fantasy if you have never read anything fantasy. Just read the back synopsis and I remember I don't remember if I read the book before the movie came out or not. I think I was reading it at the same time, like I did for It, the new It. I had never read the book before. Uh, just seeing the trailer got me excited. Like, oh, I want to see this. Harry Potter has never played a sport while flying on a broomstick. He's never worn a cloak of invisibility, befriended a giant, or helped hatch a dragon. All Harry knows is a miserable life with the Dursleys, his horrible aunt and uncle, and their abominable son, Dudley. Harry's room is a tiny closet at the foot of the stairs, and he hasn't had a birthday party in 11 years. But all that is about to change when a mysterious letter arrives by Owl Messenger. A letter with an invitation to a wonderful place he never dreamed existed. There he finds not only friends, aerial sports, and magic around every corner, but a great destiny that's been waiting for him, if Harry can survive the encounter. See that? It just pulls you in right away. Like, okay, this guy, he's that uh he's that boy with destiny surrounding him. He's like the classic kind of Greek hero who doesn't know he has the special gift, but learns it, along the way, along his path. He finds a family, so it's not an anti-family story. He finds a family, just not the one you would expect. Like he finds it in Friends, he finds it in Sirius Black, he finds it in Dumbledore. Dumbledore's like a father figure to him, and Hagrid. Hagrid's like his bestie, besides Ron and Hermione, obviously. But yeah, all these people. that mean so much to him, he finds through going to Hogwarts. Hogwarts becomes his home because he never felt like he was at home with the Dursleys. So I guess when they say anti-family, they probably just mean blood family because it's not anti-family in my opinion at all. Yep. I just wish we could leave things alone. Like if you don't want to read it, don't read it. If you don't want somebody else to read it, then I guess just like advise them not to. But that'll probably make them go out and get it anyway. See, when you tell people to not to do something, they're just gonna do it. The opposite. Disney, by the way, doesn't want you to read certain things. I'll show you. They just closed down Splash Mountain, so obviously they don't want you reading this. I immediately ordered this shit. Also, when I hear they don't want people reading, I think it's Dan Rosa, Dan Rosa's Uncle Scrooge comics. They pulled a couple of them because of like racial stereotypes, quote unquote. They're ducks and they're like animals, but they're depicted with darker skin. They're natives, so that was racially insensitive. So they decided to pull a couple of those comics. I just ordered the whole goddamn thing. Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. Shit's awesome. Never read it before, but I do like Scrooge McDuck. I watched DuckTales and really like that. So, yep. If you can, read banned books. Find out why they're banned. Discover for yourself. You know, make up your own mind. What you want to read, what you want others to read, whatever. But still, you can't tell people what they can and can't read. Like, that's my view on censorship. That's my view on book banning. It's a slippery slope. Once you start editing things out, eventually they'll get to just pulling them entirely. Like this is just too insensitive. We're gonna erase it from existence. So that's all I have to say on the subject for now, at least. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.